Welcome back to another live stream. We have Nick Rich from Audio Advice. How you doing, my friend?
Doing well, Gene. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure to have you, Nick. And as you guys know, Audio Advice is a channel partner of ours, and we really love this partnership that we have with you guys because you bring the knowledge. Not only do you sell the products that we review, but you guys have expertise in setup, configuration, installation. Got a kick-ass retail outlet that I can't wait to check out, hopefully this summer. But I wanted to have you on because right now we are giving away through you guys a Denon AVR X 3700H 9-channel AV Atmos receiver with 11 channels of internal processing. So if you want to do a 7.2.4 system, you could certainly do that. It's an awesome product to be giving away, especially now with the receiver shortage. Really appreciate you guys bringing this contest to our readers and viewers.
Yeah, we're super excited about it. It's a great receiver, and this is a fantastic partnership. So we appreciate your kind words, and we're looking forward to the partnership.
Yeah, so you guys have about another 10 or 11 days to enter this contest. And I just want to add a disclaimer right here. You will not be notified through the YouTube links below that you won. The only way you'll be notified if you're a winner is through a phone call or an email through an official Audioholics email address. So watch out for spammers. Nobody at any time is going to ask you for money, for shipping or duties or anything, any of that nonsense. So Nick, I would like to go over, there's several ways you could set up a Denon AVR, and it's not just the 3700, it's basically all the new X-Series AV receivers. You can set it up through the awesome GUI that they have through your TV, but a lot of people don't know about the web editor app, which is very useful for configuring a receiver, especially if you don't have the receiver in the same room and you have it through IP control. So I thought it'd be a good idea for you to kind of give us a rundown. When you install a Denon receiver, what's the process that you guys go through to get this whole thing set up for your customer to make sure they get the best operation and the best performance?
Yeah, so we start out, of course, with making sure the room's set up correctly because if the speakers are in the incorrect location or your subwoofers aren't set up properly, then more than likely the system's not going to sound right no matter how you set it up. So the first step of what we really do, at least if you work with one of our theater designers, we go through and actually help you position all your speakers, make sure they're in the correct spot, and then kind of go from there. So know what configuration you have and make sure it's set up right. So once we go through that, actually, Gene, do you mind if I share my screen?
Sure, go right ahead.
All right, so I actually, from our friends at Marantz, I have a handy dandy interactive web GUI, which is actually controlling one of their receivers. So I'm not going to try to mess it up too much from what they have. I don't want to go switching around everything and messing with it there, but I can actually show you guys. And so, yeah, so basically once you have your receiver and it's connected properly to all your speakers, they're set up properly, you can actually either go through your video interface, so you can have the menu up on your television screen or projector, or you can enter the IP address once it's connected to the network. And we usually prefer connecting that hardwire Ethernet directly into the AVR, and then under the network settings, you will see an IP address, and you can enter that in to your web browser just right up here in the URL bar and pull it up. And so it's pretty straightforward. I personally like doing it better than messing with remotes. I'm a little bit quicker with a mouse and keyboard than a remote. Yeah. So, and you're already likely going to be messing with Audyssey. If you're running that, you're messing with it through your computer, you have the option to do it straight through here already. So typically the first step that we want to do is make sure, I go over here to speakers. We want to make sure that everything's set up properly when it comes down to our configuration and set our distances and our amp assigns. So
the amp consign can get pretty confusing because there's so many different options there, obviously, right?
Yep. And so, the 3700 is not going to be as bad as this one. This is the Denon X-8500.
Yeah, 13 channel.
So this is a 13 channel unit. So there's a lot of different configurations here. But, what you basically want to do is decide how you want it set up. So I guess here at Marantz, their headquarters, they're running it as a 13.1, so it's a little bit a little bit different. But you can go through, and if you have, like, say 724, it's not really asking for that yet. It's just asking how many channels total. So if you're running 13, 11, etc., 9, or if you want to add in 2 zones, so they actually have an extra 2 zones, which is pretty cool for that unit. But for the 3700, you're probably just going to be running the either main or have 1 extra zone, which you can control through HEOS, or if you want to use it as just a preamplifier and have amps going through, because these units have very good preamp sections. So
yeah, they really do.
Yeah, it's not uncommon, especially if somebody just wants to have their front 2 channels on an amp. It's fairly common as well.
So just to clarify, the preamp mode, which I believe the 3700 has as well, it doesn't shut the amplifiers off. It just physically disconnects the amps from the preamps. That way it keeps the preamp super clean, even when you're turning it up past the driving point of the amplifiers. So it doesn't shut it off. If you do use the preamp mode, that's the only time I would tell you to use Eco On instead of Eco Auto. Because if you use Eco On all the time with the amp section, it's going to really neuter the power down to like 40 or 50 watts. Use Eco On in the preamp mode only, just because you're not using the amp section anyway, and it just dissipates less power and saves you some energy and some heat buildup. Otherwise, use auto for the
I pretty much never really mess with the Eco just for that reason, because less power consumption, especially when you're using amplifiers, is probably not the best call. But moving on from that, so there's a few different like layouts and for your bed level. So it goes pretty much right over to your bed level speakers, which, for those of you who don't know, typically the ones that are at ear level or supposed to be at ear level according to Dolby. So for this setup, it looks like, I think they're running a 726. That's what it looks like they're running. You can mess with it. So you have your surround backs and your front wides, or just a 5 channel, which is your front 3 and your standard surrounds. So it just depends on the configuration that you're running. And, if you have questions on that, contact your dealer, or if you purchase through us, let us know. We'll help you set all of that up.
Now, is it a good idea to set up your speaker configuration before you run Audyssey, or would Audyssey kind of figure out what speakers are connected?
Audyssey can, but I typically just go ahead and do all my setup, because I can have my distances set and everything ahead of time, and then I go through and do it. Now, I want to make sure everything's set up proper, especially with my inputs as well. So Audyssey is more of a finishing touch in my case.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, going from that, still on the configuration, back to height speakers. And so, these are the different types of configurations they have. And so this is where a lot of people get confused, because they're saying, well, I'm running Dolby Atmos, so I must have Dolby speaker, or, Dolby SP here. And so typically these are the reflection-based speakers on this side, and then this side is the in-ceiling speakers. So they're running a 6-channel in-ceiling setup. And so that's where you go through finally and decide the positioning of those in-ceiling speakers.
Now, quick interruption to you. This doesn't affect 3700 AVRs, because the 3700 doesn't have Oro. But if you want to use Oro on a Denon or Marantz receiver, if you use tops as your speaker layout, then you can't do Oro 3D right now. I've actually asked Sound United if they could change that, because a lot of their competitors, you could do tops and not have to do front and rear heights and still activate Oro 3D. So I just wanted to make that clear to people. If you are planning on using Oro, you're going to have to either use height channels front and back, or you're going to have to configure your tops as heights. That way you could activate all 3 immersive surround codecs.
That's interesting. I haven't thought about that, but that's a good piece of knowledge. Hopefully they'll get that cleared up. But yeah, on the layout, we're just doing tops for pretty much everything, because on this setup, I'm pretty sure there's it's all in ceiling for these. I think they're running a standard Atmos setup, if I had to assume. So moving on to that. So that's just the standard amp assign, and then we go over to speaker configuration. This is where there's some debate, and depending on how you set up your system, I don't really understand. I'll preface that I don't fully understand what their setup is here based off of the sizing of their speakers. But typically, I was looking at it before we started, and they had their surrounds and surround backs as large. So I don't fully
Knowing
understand.
Phil Jones, he probably has BMW 801s for the 5-bed channel.
All of
I
them.
guarantee you that's what the deal is. 801s or 802s.
Well, I was trying to figure out because the center is small, and so I was trying to figure it out. I was looking at it. I was like, well, I don't know. So yeah, this is the one that I guess is in their facility. But yeah, so we were going through these, and this is where a lot of people kind of debate. I'm a firm believer in if you have your subwoofers set up properly, then let your subwoofers kind of do their work and set the speakers to small. Because basically, whenever you're running them as large, it's assuming it's a full range speaker. And for those of you who don't know what full range is, it's the ability to play from pretty much 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, or somewhere right around there. That's a true full range speaker. And so pretty much no in-wall speaker that's most of us are going to have is going to be able to cover that, or even floor standing speakers. I mean, I've got the Rebel F226 BEs, and they're definitely not going down to 20 hertz. So
I would run those small anyway. It just makes it easier to integrate with subs.
Exactly. And if you have, in a room with properly set up subs, let's say you have 4 subs, let them do their work, let them do their job,
And you're still benefiting from the tower because the tower has more output, from 80 hertz on than a small bookshelf would. So it would better match your subwoofer output.
Yeah. Unless, well, we'll go into kind of the 2-channel purist side of things, but 2-channel is one of those that can kind of be, if you're running, turntable or something, you really want a dedicated 2-channel setup. It's arguable, but basically, there
is a 2-channel configuration on.
Yeah, that's what I was going to jump onto. As we get down there, but for now, I would say, unless you have 3 decent sized floor standing speakers behind acoustically transparent screen, or something along those lines, typically I set these to small. Again, your mileage may vary. Mm-hmm. We'll have to take a look at it, but and it also better uses the crossover on this unit. So typically why. Jumping on through here again, some of these are pretty basic, and if you've ever had an AVR, you're probably used to it. But yeah, so we appreciate it, Andrew. So going through here, the distances. Gina and I were talking about this. Some AVRs, I want to kind of talk general about this, so other people that are watching that have other brands, these are all things that are kind of on other brands as well, maybe worded a little bit differently. But for this, some room correction software, whenever you run it, it's going to try to set distances in some way, shape, or form. I never trust it. It's super simple, but I usually never trust it. The best thing you can do is get a handy dandy laser measurer and go straight from the head of the seat, because some people think, for whatever reason, that it's either from the floor or it's from, I've had some people that think it's from the AVR, where the distance is from, which is it always cracks me up, because the mic attaches to it. So you're like, maybe it's the distance from, I don't know. But so you really just want to set your distances as accurately as possible, because that's determining the timing that it takes from your speaker. It's assumed timing from the speaker to your ears. Now, subwoofers can be a little bit different. I know, Gene, you and I talked about this before. If you're running DSP on a subwoofer, which is the digital signal processing, it can cause a slight delay. So we want to compensate for that. Is there an exact number? Is it like 2 or 3 feet?
It really depends on the amount of delay in a sub. I've seen subs that have 3 to 5 milliseconds of delay. So let's say it's 5 milliseconds. If the sub is 15 feet away, then you'll probably set the sub to 20 feet to compensate for it. And you really getting REW and doing acoustical measurements will ultimately show you that. Or some of these room correction systems are getting more sophisticated enough where they will calculate the proper phase integration between the subs and the mains. Like the Anthem, for example, the new ARC Beta does that. Not sure if the Audyssey X does that or not. I have not played too much with the new Audyssey X. I don't know if you have.
No, I haven't played with it as much. I'm also on Mac, so I have to use Parallels. It's a lot more pain for me.
Oh, that's right. Got a super chat here from Bubblehead, $5. Thank you. 7.2.4, 6,700. Keep up the great content. Nice coffee. I like that.
Yeah. So kind of jumping on, I think this is really all we're going to cover on this part. Anything you want to add to this?
No, other than experiment, I guess. If you think the sub's not integrating well with your mains, you could vary that subwoofer distance. Hopefully you can measure it. but experiment is key. Getting that subwoofer distance correct to get proper phase integration for your front 3 LCRs is really the most important out of any of those settings, in my opinion.
And if you have granular phase adjustment on your sub, you can also play with that as well.
Right.
But not all subs have that. I mean, some just have a 180. So going over to levels, if you want to manually set your levels, this is how you do it. I've recently been doing this more, with an SPL meter, test tones, and just going through and doing it. And it does let you feel like you get a little bit more control of your system. Now with modern room correction, it can help you with that automatic setup, but sometimes it's nice to go through and double check everything.
So you know what the first thing I do after I do a level calibration in most cases, assuming it's auto done, or even with an SPL meter, I always boost the center channel a good 1 or 2 dB, because a lot of movies just don't give you that clarity and dialogue, and you just want to have that pop a little bit more. It's a personal thing, but I know everyone says you want to channel balance all your speakers to 75, but I just find the best setups tend to boost the center channel a little bit. That's just my
Well, and a tip that I would give to everybody, if you get a new system and you set it, especially if you're transitioning from an old system, give it like a week before you decide to, if you tune it to, let's say you do this manually all to 75, and you say maybe my subs are a little, anemic or whatever, just give it like a week and let it play. And if you still feel that way, that's the time to play with it. But you have to give your brain time to adapt to it, before then, especially if you're not super experienced with the setups. But jumping from there, the next step you want to really do is go into the crossover section. So in theirs, they have it set individually.
Most people are going to use the all setting.
Yeah, most people are going to do all. I typically don't go individually, especially, they've got full in their fronts, their center channel. I if anything, I don't really adjust them far beyond 10 or 20 hertz myself. But sometimes I will mess with a center a little bit because I see some people put a center inside of a cabinet, and sometimes it makes it a little bit, just the bass gain's a little bit higher because it's enclosed. And sometimes I'll play with that crossover and see if I can get it right. But that's one of the few examples. The rest of the time, I just usually leave it pretty close to 80.
I'm the same as you. I don't usually vary the crossover settings more than about 20 hertz between channel groups, because sometimes that could cause phase summation issues to the sub.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. But the rest of this, they've got their tops set at around 100, which is fine. They're not going to be playing super deep bass anyway, so we're not terribly worried about that. But like I said, just for normal clarity, just set them to all. Again, for those of you who are joining in late, this is not how we endorse necessarily setting it up. They've got a pretty unique system there, I'm sure. So
this is one of the most confusing settings for most users. The subwoofer mode, LFE and LFE plus main, and I hate the way they call that. And most of the receiver companies really make it confusing, because people are actually thinking, when you said it, if you want to show the drop down where it says LFE plus main, when you set it for LFE plus main, some people think that it's actually sending LFE to the main channels, when it's actually not. What LFE plus main does is it basically copies the bass from the main channels to the subwoofer channel, and the subwoofer also gets the LFE. But in no situation does the main channels get LFE unless you turn the subwoofer channel off. If you're not using a subwoofer, then you're going to route LFE and all the sum bass from bass managed speakers into your main speakers.
And Gene, you may just want to explain the difference between bass and LFE in this case, because a lot of people view it as hand in hand when it's similar but not the same.
So LFE is its own 0.1. It's the 0.1 in a 5.1 or above soundtrack. It's the low frequency effect channel, basically. And typically that's reserved for to output to your subwoofers, because it's got really low end bass that most regular speakers can't handle.
Yeah, and so I see people use LFE main quite a bit in like 2-channel setups.
Because you want to have your subwoofer active when you have your main speakers large.
Yeah, because if you set your main speakers as large, like you have floor standing speakers, like we went over in the past setup, if you go down and just set it to LFE, if I'm not mistaken, whenever you're playing a 2-channel mix, it's just not going to have any subwoofer.
Exactly. You're exactly right.
Whenever you go over to LFE plus main, it actually allows you to integrate in the sub for like a 2.1 system, which is
And the danger there, and it goes back to why you were saying in most cases you want to set all your speakers small. The danger when you use the LFE plus main setting is if you don't get the proper integration of your mains. Actually, if you get perfect integration with your mains and your sub, then you're going to double the bass in the common areas there, and you're going to get too much bass. So if you don't EQ that out, it could sound very boomy.
Yeah, that's you know, do you know if you can do that with Audyssey X yet? If you can,
I know you
mess
can go
with that
in
at
and
all?
edit the curves. Yeah, you can go in and edit the curves after you do the calibration. I'm sure you could do some manipulation there, but unless you're handy with measurements and you know what you're doing, just set all your speakers to small. You'll make your life so much easier. And get 2 subwoofers in your system.
Yep, 2 or more.
The low pass filter on the LFE, that's another thing. It's okay to set it to 80 hertz. I've read and I've heard through mixers that they could send up to 120 hertz of bass information from the LFE channel to the subwoofer. So if you set it to 80 hertz and there's bass in the LFE channel going to 120, you're going to truncate some of that bass. I would just leave that at 120 personally.
Yeah, that's where most people I do end up setting to is right around 120, because I think that's where Dolby mixes typically assign it. So yeah, that's right around anywhere between, again, no telling what kind of speakers they're using in the setup, but probably, like you said, probably
giving me a little bit, it's triggering me a little bit. I want to go in and kind of change things.
Well, I want to see what it is before I touch the thing. And it could have been somebody like myself in here before, just messing around showing settings, and it ended up changing a bunch, because it's, like I said, demo unit in the store, so very well could be. But over to the this is the part that Gene and I were just talking about, where you can go through and make kind of a separate settings for your 2-channel mode. So theirs is set to auto, so their front set to large subwoofer. What's interesting, so it says, so we just had in the LFE plus main, and so I'm assuming this is just saying generally it's on. I'm not sure there. That's interesting. But yeah, if we went on to manual, we could more finely adjust this. And
we got an interesting super chat here I want to adjust. Appreciate that, J2 Lorda. What if the speaker cable is 75 feet long, but the speaker is 10 feet in a straight line away from the receiver? Does that manual setting the speaker distance affect the sound sync? It doesn't matter how long your speaker cable is. The signal propagation through a piece of cable goes nearly the speed of light. So I would be more worried about having a long speaker cable and that you're going to lose maybe some efficiency, because some of that's going to be lost into resistance, but it's not going to affect the timing between the speakers. You definitely want to go with the acoustical timing that you measure either with the microphone or you measure with the laser pointer from where your main listening position is relative to each speaker.
Yep. Yeah, it's a common misconception. There's kind of the older mentality of, different lengths of speaker cable making making a difference on that. It's not going to make as much of a difference in that.
It doesn't. I actually did a video on speaker cable lengths. Does it matter? And if you guys want to look at that, it's on our YouTube channel. You could just search it out.
So jumping from that, I'm trying to, is there anything else you want to cover right
here?
Basically,
so the 2-channel playback is kind of a nice feature. If you want to be a purist, like you were saying, you have 2 options. Either you use pure direct, and then it bypasses the bass management in the AVR, or you use 2-channel playback settings here, and you could set it for large. You could turn the subwoofer on or off. So it could be it's basically an independent bass management setup for 2-channel versus multi-channel. In my opinion, I think if you get the setup right in multi-channel, it should work as well in 2-channel. But if you just want to have bragging rights, say, look what my main speakers could do without the sub, then here you are. You have the ability to set it custom for a 2-channel playback.
Yep. So going from there, the rest are kind of just pretty simple things that are going to depend on your exact setup. I mean, we can touch on inputs a little bit, because this is where you're going to go through, and naming a source is very important for the entire household. We got to remember that. Even if we know what HDMI 3 is, someone else probably doesn't. So assigning your inputs, you can do some pretty cool things here. Some people like to kind of make hybrid systems of, for example, they'll have, be streaming music while the TV's still on. If you like to party, whatever, you can do whatever you need to. So yeah, going to there, you can just go through and assign your HDMI, pretty much any analog input, composite, etc. So that's the basic stuff there. Source rename, like I said, go through, name it what you need to, and then hiding sources. This is really handy. Yeah. This is super handy. I mean, I do this with a lot of a lot of customers. Like I said, we do remote calibration. So if we know generally what's going to be in their system, then we'll show them how to do it. But just say, let's go ahead and hide it, because it makes ease of use much better. So this is a really handy feature. In source levels,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, just the source levels. If you have a input that's louder than the rest, that's pretty much how you usually get that to be leveled.
You know what they don't have that I'm starting to see, I think that we need on all these AVRs? Have you noticed when you go from an Atmos soundtrack on a Roku or an Apple TV, and then you switch over to like 2-channel or 5.1, and it's way louder?
No, I mean, I've done that before with like certain phono preamps, because I'm a turntable guy as well. So yeah, I've done that where either phono preamps can be much quieter, even if they have adjustable gain. Sometimes just naturally it's going to be a little bit quieter. So I've done that, but I've noticed it quite a bit, but not usually with what analog sources were you thinking there, or what were you using?
I'm thinking digital. Like I was using my Anthem receiver the other day, and when it went from Atmos to, I was watching, I think, American Dad, which was in 2-channel. It was like 10 dB louder, and I was thinking to myself, we should have like a level adjust for Atmos sources, because even when you listen to Apple Music spatial audio, if you go from an Atmos soundtrack to a 2-channel soundtrack, there's a good 6 or 7 dB difference through Apple Music, and even more in Tidal. So I think having an Atmos relative level would probably be a good feature to discuss with some of these AVR companies.
Yeah, I wonder if that is a thing with any of them, but probably not. I mean, I haven't heard of it myself, so I'm not sure. But I wonder if it has to do with compression as well. Because I mean, even if you're just surfing cable these days,
there's more compression in it. Yeah,
there's more compression. There's some are just louder, but they're mostly getting rid of that.
One thing I think we wanted to touch, if you can go back to the main, because I'm not sure it's there. There's a setting for sound settings where you can do, like, you could turn the center spread on and off for
that's under, I think it's under audio, or is it? I was looking for that earlier. Where was it? I think it actually may be under video. No, it's probably not under video. It's under
sound parameters. It's sometimes it's hard to find.
Let's see.
So
I think I found it earlier, but it was grayed out for some reason on this unit. Whenever I was messing with it, I can't remember exactly where it was. I think it is under audio, but I think it's grayed out.
You can adjust relative levels by input. Yeah, I'm not talking about relative levels by input. I'm talking about the type of source it detects, whether it's an Atmos source or if it's a 5.1 or 2-channel, because there are sometimes level differences between those sources. It's in there. It's grayed out. It's called surround parameter. So when it's not grayed out, which they must have it in pure direct or something, but when it's not grayed out, you go into surround parameters, and that's where you turn center spread on or off. I'm a big proponent, as you guys know, when I'm up mixing 2-channel music with the Dolby up mixer, to turn the center spread on. That way it preserves the imaging of the front channel sound stage, and it doesn't dump everything to the center channel and make it sound like it's in mono.
Yeah, that's an interesting one to highlight. Yeah, I wish I could click on it, guys. I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to go and mess with their settings too much. But yeah, for the rest of that, I mean, I don't. Gene, do you mess with the graphic EQ at all?
There are cases where, if I'm not using Audyssey, if I just want to add a little tilt to the high frequencies, I'll go in and use it. But otherwise, I wish Denon, I hope if anyone's watching this at Sound United, please do away with the graphic EQ. 1996 called. It's time to move on. We have parametric EQs now. Most of the companies are using PEQ. That way you could adjust the Q of the filters. You could adjust, where you want to do the correction much more precisely than you could with a graphic EQ. So I'm hoping they switch that to parametric going forward. because it's
Yeah.
just kind of silly to have a graphic EQ in this day and age.
Yeah, I could say I don't use this as much. I usually go through and mess with the curve itself. If I'm doing some type of room correction for customers.
Yeah,
If
you can't do
Yeah.
much bass correction with a graphic EQ. It only goes to like 63 hertz. So all your
Yeah.
modal problems are below 63 hertz in most cases, and the graphic EQ becomes useless.
And for those who want to kind of see what it generally looks like, something like this.
Yeah, it's like 7 bands, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Or 9 bands, actually.
9 bands, yeah. Yeah, I don't use it as much just because when I'm mostly doing calibrations for customers, and whenever we do that, if they say, hey, doesn't have enough bass, we go through and tweak the curve until we can find it. But that might be something good for people to mess with if they just want to they don't want to go and mess with the curve. They just kind of want to move some things around and see what they like. It might be handy to have.
So
there.
it's important to note now, and I don't think you have the software for this live stream, but Audyssey now has the PC editor software, which makes their system much more robust and configurable. In the past, they had the editor app, which worked okay if you had like an iPad or a tablet, but not so great if you only had like a small phone. It was very hard to make adjustments on it. But it looks like they're going in the right direction now, having the PC software, so you can really go in and tweak things out. So that's probably going to do a separate video on that. I have not run mine yet. I've got the license, and I've got the new microphone that's supposedly perfectly calibrated for their reference. So maybe we'll have you back on after we run this and talk about the results and how to get the best performance out of using Audyssey, because everybody's using Room EQ these days, but you got to use it sparingly, otherwise you can make things worse, not better.
Right. I'm trying to think. Really on this is most of it. Limit. I tell some people to set a volume limit because if their dog, happens to jump on the couch and sit in the remote,
or your sister-in-law can't get sound out of an input, and she keeps turning the volume up, and then she finally gets it to work, and it's so loud that everything shuts off. It goes into protection mode. I've had that happen.
I had a system where somebody was Chromecasting their phone straight to their AVR, and they were trying to turn up their phone's volume to hear something else, and they had music playing in the other room, and they had like a 350 watt amp connected to like a pair of 702s, and just immediately clipped it and damaged the tweeter. So that wasn't fun, but
that is definitely
So part of the reason you want to set that volume limit, but so for the rest of this, scale, pretty basic on all of that. Power on, you can set the level. I normally do last myself, but you can set it to a specific level.
I would never do last. What if you were partying the night before and you were drinking and you had the volume cranked up, and then you go to turn it on and you get blasted in the morning?
Yeah. Hey man, I mean, I on this system right here, I'm running a 2.1 with an integrated on this system, and so it automatically goes back to the last level I had it. So I've just gotten so used to correcting it immediately. As soon as I turn it on, I'm like, all right, I know where I generally was. And I'm also, if I'm in between content, I'm one of those guys that turns everything back down because I don't want the next thing to clip it immediately. So
here's an interesting question I wanted to address here from again from JT Larada. I hope I'm not butchering your name. Does manually setting up the distances affect the timing between voice and video lip sync? Wouldn't it be better to let Audyssey calculate the distances? So whatever you do with the distances for your channel to channel is relative to each other, and it's not going to affect the lip syncing issue. If you are having lip syncing issues, there is an adjustment for that, but it's changing your channel trims a couple of feet or here or there is not going to really have any impact on that. And at least that's been my experience.
Yeah, I was trying to find, there is, trying to find, no, that's all the resolution. They do have a lip sync.
There's like an auto lip sync too, isn't there?
Yeah, there's an auto, and then you can go back through and manually change it.
Oh, what do you do for the 4K signal format? Do you set it for enhance, and why?
I said, that's the thing. I read about that the other day, and I just left it on enhanced because I think it had something to do with the frame rate, if I'm not mistaken. If anybody in the chat knows, please let me know. I tried to look into it, and it made very little sense to me. Kind of like TV format. You're like, so this one, it's like, that one's for, this one was pretty easy. That's for America, and that one's for Europe and Asia. But yeah, I don't really understand the enhanced versus standard. I mean, as
I thought
you know,
it's the only way you can get the 18 gigabits is if you use enhanced. Otherwise, standard is like for 4K. I think there's less output available.
that would be my assumption. I don't know. If I have the option between standard and enhanced on really anything in life, I'm probably going to pick enhanced. And if it works, then I'm going to assume it's better. Yeah,
Brandon saying it's 4K 120.
that's what I thought. That's what I was saying initially.
Thanks,
I thought
Brandon.
it was 4K 120 was right around there. But again,
Yep.
always that's good life advice. Always go for enhanced if possible. But for the rest of the stuff, on-screen display. I'm the one weird person that wishes they had middle as an option for volume, and I'll tell you why. Because whenever I use lens memory to do 240 to 1 screens, and I mask the top and the bottom, I can't see the volume. And so I wish they had like an option for that. And they do have a way to change aspect ratios, but that's for 4:3 and 16:9, and you can't do 235 or 240 to 1.
Right.
So the rest of these, are pretty simple. And these are just more nitpicky type.
Now the Helios setup, you do that through a separate app, right?
Yeah. So I think you can start to set it up. I'm going to see if there's anything through here that we need to cover.
I saw something about Helios. I personally don't use Helios, but I thought there was a separate app through your phone.
There is a separate app through your phone. You can do some basic setup through this as well. And we can jump over that.
The enhanced does 10 and 12-bit 444 color. Others it's just 8-bit 444.
Perfect.
So use enhanced if your TV supports it.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate that, George. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to cover on all of this. ARC. So now typically we're talking about consoles 4K, or modern consoles like video game consoles and PCs can do 4K at 120 hertz. I pretty much, if I'm using a television, I know some projectors now support HDMI 2.1, but for TVs, I still run my console directly into the TV and then run ARC out of it because it still takes some of that latency out. So that's what I do like HDMI ARC for. I have pretty much ditched TV apps for the most part. Get NVIDIA Shield, Roku, something like that. They're going to do a better job anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
But some people, there's someone in the house that is just always going to press the Netflix button on the remote. How it is. So, if you want to have an ARC mode for that, that's perfectly fine.
The only problem with setting ARC on is if you're using a control system that could really wreak havoc on it.
Yeah. And most of the people... Yeah, most people who work with remotely, no pun intended, don't use a control system because, they're doing it themselves. And so, Crestron, Control 4, Savant, all of those typically require an integrator.
Right.
So we do some of it remotely, but most of it we do is local. And so we'll set all that up. But for the rest of speaking of control, HDMI control, certain projectors, like whenever you cut on your projector or you cut on your receiver, vice versa, it'll switch on the receiver, which you can kind of...
Yoko would click the Netflix button on the TV. That's funny.
I like that. Yeah. But yeah, for the Netflix, or for the Netflix control, man, you messed up my brain, man. The HDMI control, yeah, it's basically just CEC controls. So pretty straightforward. The rest of this is going to be kind of a per case scenario. Vertical stretch is pretty much only used for anamorphic lens. I don't know one person in the entire world that has ever used this myself. If somebody's used it, please let me know. But this is pretty much just if you're using an anamorphic lens on a projector and you needed to stretch it, rather than using the stretch mode in the projector, you can do it on your AVR for some reason.
You would typically want your display to do that though, right?
Yeah. I really don't understand why it's still on here, but I guess the same. I don't know. I really don't, but it's
because they could do it. That's why.
Yeah, it's an easy thing to do. So yeah, those are really the main settings. I don't want to go through and nitpick all of these because, like I said, they're kind of per basis.
It is cool that they give you all these picture adjustments that most AVRs are just complete pass through that
Right.
just a computer switch. But these guys actually give you some processing if you want to use that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to play around with them. Most people tend to use the one that's on their display already on their projector or their television, but you can play around with those.
I guess the advantage of that is if you're putting all your sources in the AVR and your TV is only on one input, you can't reconfigure your TV for each source like an Xbox versus a Roku unless you go and change the picture settings on your TV. Well, on this, you can configure it per input. So if you want to tweak the video for your Xbox or whatever,
Yeah.
So
I can see that. Some television you could have multiple presets, and people may just memorize them in their head and just say, "Hey, I'm going to go to this preset for this source." Or same thing with projectors and things like that. But it's a neat thing to have, and I would rather have more options than less options. So yeah,
sure.
that's
the other thing we didn't talk about is you have different speaker presets. I don't know if it shows that on that menu or not.
I don't think
Maybe
so.
On the speakers.
Sometimes they put it on the inputs. I know on I don't think they have it on here.
Well, I mean, all the Denon and Marantz receivers have 2 speaker presets, which is useful if you're doing one calibration where all your blinds are up in your house and then the other one where they're all down, or if you have a main listening position, 2 main listening positions. If you have one where you're home alone versus when you have guests over, you can do 2 separate calibrations and have 2 different speaker presets, which is a good thing to have. I just wanted to mention that in case.
Yeah, no, that is a cool piece. I know it's here somewhere. If I wasn't on a live video, I'd probably be able to find it in about 2 seconds. But
yeah, right.
I probably missed it 4 times just scrolling my eyes past it.
So that's basically the web interface. Obviously, the GUI is really good on these receivers. The graphic interface is really good. In fact, when you first turn on a Denon or Marantz receiver, it actually prompts you like how many speakers do you have, where the speaker locations are. I would recommend going through that at the very minimum. It gets you in the ballpark of what you're doing for your setup, and then go into either the web interface or continue with the GUI and do all your tweaking there. When you agree?
Yep, 100% agree. I was reading a comment. Somebody was saying that HDMI 2.1 update is a bit pointless because of TV and eARC. I really agree when it comes down to TVs, because they definitely have there is an advantage, especially if you're using video games and things like that. But for projectors now, a lot of new projectors have the advantage now of having 2.1. So the new Epson LS 12,000 and 11,000. As well as the the JVC projectors, so their new NZ line, so the NZ 7 and 8 and 9, and then the DLA. So yeah, there is an advantage to having it, but yeah, right now TVs, I prefer direct connection, but most only have like one HDMI 2.1 input at the moment. So
true.
That's the other thing. If you're lucky enough to have a PS5, Xbox Series X, and a gaming PC, you're a lucky person. But they're out there for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this really is the interface, and like you said, it depends on how you want to set it up. I prefer doing this, and we do a lot of this through like Zoom Remote Connect, so we can go through Zoom, do the remote access to people's computers, and we can go through and help set up the the device remotely for our customers. Of course, we can't set up everybody's as much as I would love to. If you purchase through Audio Advice, that's one service that we offer.
Yeah, so you guys, I just want to plug your channel for a minute. YouTube/Audio Advice or audioadvice.com for the website where you can purchase products or get technical help. You guys do live streams often, right? And you do product overviews and you do setup tips and all that stuff. Yep,
we do live stream. We do a monthly live stream with a monthly giveaway. This month, I think it's a soundbar, and they're going to kill me for not knowing this off the top of my head. But we do have a giveaway this month. Go to our website and check it out in case you're watching this in the future. So we'll have a current giveaway.
To Audio Advice, so you guys can check it out. Lastly, I want to again promote the Denon 3700H AV receiver contest. It's going on right now at Audioholics. There's a link in the video description below. There's a link on our homepage if you scroll down a little bit. We plug it in our newsletter. So if you said you didn't know that this contest was going on, and it's been going on for almost 30 days now, then you're not paying attention and you're not a true audioholic. So guys, enter this contest if you're in the United States. It's your chance to win a brand new AVR. Awesome product. Appreciate Audio Advice for hosting this contest for us. And Nick, it's great having you here again. We got to have you back on and do some more home theater related stuff. Maybe
absolutely.
sound tips or something like that. We'll brainstorm some ideas. We'll get you on again next month.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, guys. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. You get direct access to me and our fellow audioholics if you want to ask questions or suggest video topics. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.